SEC Media Day, Day 3, our coverage continues live here from Nashville. And here in the Next Round studios, we're about to talk a little bit about some of the prospects that should have a great year in college and could end up at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. As always, our coverage being brought to you by our friends at mybookie.ag.
Yeah, code Next Round when you go to mybookie.ag. Get that sign-on bonus up to $1,000. Mybookie.ag, code Next Round. Friend of ours, Jim Nagy, with us. He is the executive director of the Reese Senior Bowl, who is about to celebrate, and this is hard to believe, their 75th anniversary. You haven't been there for all 75.
No.
But, I mean, that's crazy to think about, really.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys. Yeah, it's a big year for us. Obviously, the game's been in Mobile for 74 of those 75 years. The first year is in Jacksonville, but the game's a huge part of our community and the fabric of the community. And so, to celebrate 75, it's big. We're going to do a 75th gala with a team and do a team vote and bring a bunch of great players back. So it's going to be a big year.
Okay, is that a fan vote, coach vote? How's that going to work?
We're going to do an online fan vote.
Yeah.
So that's
so follow your socials and everything.
Yeah. So we're gonna leave it up to the fans to decide. But yeah, everything's gonna be web based. So we just got a sponsor on that. I can't reveal it yet, but when we do that, we'll crank that out really to coincide with the kickoff of football season. So like September 1, that first month of the season, we'll do the fan voting.
Yeah. So keep an eye on that. We'll promote it too. Reese's Senior Bowl, and the game is February 3rd this year.
I believe so. That's what I was told. I was told
I'm getting an assured nod of the head.
Okay. So February 3rd, yes. It's Saturday, February 3rd at Hancock Whitney in Mobile.
All right, so you're digging through tape now. So Jim does this. I mean, you worked in the NFL. Jim worked in the NFL, so he's done this his whole life. And you just continue doing it, digging through tape as if you're an NFL scout. So, and I know you haven't made it all the way through. You got a ton of guys to watch. But from what you've watched, if I said give me a position group that this is going to be a strong year for in college football, it would be what?
SEC based.
Yeah.
I would say it's not a sexy position. It's not receiver, but the center position is really strong.
Wow.
In the league.
Okay.
Cooper Mays at Tennessee. You got Kingsley. How do you say Kingsley's last name at Florida? I'm going to meet him later today.
Yeah.
I got to get the pronunciation. But yeah, there's like 4 or 5 draftable centers in the SEC, and usually most years that's about as many that get drafted in the entire draft. All schools.
Wow.
So to have one league have that many draftable centers is big. And the quarterback group is really, that drives the bus, that drives the narrative.
Yeah.
I know we're all talking about quarterbacks, but this is in terms of the volume of quarterbacks that are going to be in play for the Senior Bowl. There's probably 20 to 25 guys right now that have a legit chance, and it's because so many guys came back. So many guys used that extra COVID year or took NIL money and decided the NFL they could wait on that. So it is a huge quarterback class.
I mean, he made me feel like we're in the Big Ten media days. Center, big year for center. I feel like I'm in Big Ten.
But when you talk quarterbacks, a couple of those, including Jaden Daniels in the SEC this year, with some championship potential there. When you watch a Jaden Daniels play, maybe early on in his Arizona State days to now at LSU, what do you see on tape that maybe has changed for him?
Yeah, it changed a lot even over the course of last year. So I think my first exposure to Jaden was his freshman year at Arizona State. They had a receiver named Brandon Ayuk, who was a 1,000-yard receiver for the 49ers last year. Played in the Senior Bowl. I mean, Jaden was like 168 pounds or 170 pounds playing in the Pac-12 as a freshman. I was at their first game last year against Florida State in New Orleans, and he looked so uncomfortable, right? Like new system, new teammates. He looked really out of sorts. And then I saw him play in the middle of the year against Ole Miss, and it was better. And then after the year, or this spring, going back and watching the tape of the entire season, man, there might not have been a more improved player in college football last year in Jaden Daniels. So no, he is right there for a spot. Like if we had to pick a Senior Bowl roster right now, Jaden would get an invite. I mean, he's a really good player.
So a player like Will Rogers. So when you were in the NFL, I mean, it's safe to say the air raid guys kind of had a little bit of stigma to them, didn't they?
Yeah.
The air raid quarterbacks, and that's. Under Coach Leach, what obviously he played under, all signs point towards Zach Arnett changing that offensive style. So how big is it for him over these next couple of years? Because he's kind of going to be able to maybe kick that stigma and play a little more of a pro-style offense.
Sure. I mean, you look at the guys. I mean, going way back to Graham Harrell and the guys Coach Leach had. I mean, I think the obviously the most high-profile one's Patrick Mahomes. He's proven he can do it.
Yeah,
Right?
I think he's all right.
He's kind of superseded the scheme. And we had Gardner Minshew a few years ago, who's had a good career so far and is going to probably start the year for the Colts. But yeah, that hasn't been a real transferable scheme. So I talked to Will about that yesterday, and he's excited. Yeah, it's more West Coast. The new coordinators come in from App State, and we had a running back in the Senior Bowl last year from App State, so I'm familiar with what they did. And so yeah, it's an opportunity for Will to prove he can play in more of a pro-style scheme. They're going to ask him to do a lot more pro-style stuff. So he's excited about it, and it's going to be a big eval year for him because coming, that's a big jump from what he's done in the past and what people have liked about him. To what he's going to be asked to do this year.
It's funny, when I was growing up, all of us really in the 80s, if you played quarterback at BYU, you had a spot in the NFL because half the league was running the West Coast.
Yeah.
Right? That's what all those, the Detmers and all those guys were just running West Coast, and you could be a backup your whole life because if the guy gets hurt, I know the playbook.
That's right.
So it's interesting that he's going from one that kind of has a stigma to one that has almost always had a place in the NFL.
Well, I'll say this. People ask about, just the ramifications of the portal and just the current state of college football. And it's not just volatile with players. Like, we're seeing a lot of player movement. There is a ton of movement on the coaching side as well.
Right.
I think in our state, we're probably most in tune with it with what's gone on at Alabama over the last decade. Coach Saban seems like there's a revolving door at all those positions on his coaching staff. So, but it's from an evaluation standpoint, it's great, man. You see some of these players. I mean, if they stick around, whether they move and go somewhere else or in Alabama, I mean, you'll see a guy play for 2 or 3 or 4 different coordinators, and so it's great from like a football learning perspective. Like, these guys have been exposed to so much, and they're asked to do a lot of different things. So it's really helped. It's been easier for the NFL. It's cleaned up some of the unknowns on the evaluation side because these guys are being asked to do so many things over the course of their college careers.
Yeah. Have you seen a position? I mean, I see the money in the NFL sort of moving positions now, defensive tackles getting so much money, this and that.
Absolutely.
Have you seen a position morph in football, but specifically at the NFL level? Was it tight end, linebacker, edge rushers, defensive tackles? Which positions morphed the most in your career?
I don't know. That's a great question. I'll say this: like, when I got into scouting, over 20 years ago now, about 25 years ago, when you called a player a tweener, it carried a negative connotation. It's like, we don't know what he is. Is he a safety? Is he a linebacker? Like, what is this guy? Now everyone's looking for tweeners. Like, they're looking for guys that have different skill sets, like running back. I mean, like Alvin Kamara is a great example. I mean, you can split him out. Christian McCaffrey, you can play him in the slot. They can run detached routes. You've got defense. But Micah Parsons for the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, he's coming off the edge one snap. He's playing off the ball as a stand-up linebacker the next snap. I mean, so I'll say this. I think the NFL is doing a great job of using particular player skill sets better than ever. I think when I got into the league, like, we were just forcing guys into schemes and, okay, you're playing this, but, I think coaches are doing a much better job of using their talent.
Yeah, I know the Parcells model used to be, and he wasn't alone in this, obviously, but it was you invest in quarterback, cornerback, pass rusher, left tackle.
Yep.
I mean, that has changed. I mean, those are still primo positions, but that's changed a little bit, hasn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of the narrative, even down here this week, is about the running back spot. I think just because the Saquon Barkley tag number came up the other day, Saquon and Tony Pollard for the Cowboys, and that's a whole, we could go off on that. I mean, that's just, I hate it for those running backs, right? But again, if you've got a guy like Dameon Pierce who played in the Senior Bowl a couple years ago from Florida. The Texans took him in the 4th round 2 years ago, and last year he was on pace for like 1,300 yards before he got hurt late in the year. So if you can get a guy in the 4th round, why would you pay? And as good as Saquon Barkley is, why would you pay him top dollar? But I do think defensive tackle is probably the position where you're putting all your money right now. You want guys coming off the edge, but if you can get that quick pressure in a quarterback's face, those guys, I mean, Chris Jones from Kansas City, the Chiefs just got a huge deal, and
everybody wants an Aaron Donald.
Aaron Donald, and we've seen the Alabama guys, Jonathan Allen, and all those guys have been getting paid the last couple of years. So that's really become the premium position. And a guy that was here this week that I met up with the other day, McKinley Jackson from Texas A&M. He is going to be, to me, in terms of pro prospects that's been here at the SEC Media Days, he's going to be the top guy.
When we're approaching combines and then the NFL draft after the Senior Bowl experience every year, you hear a lot of people say, well, the SEC got me ready for the NFL. I played in the SEC. I feel like the transition's not going to be as difficult for me for the NFL. As a guy who watches all of college football and studies the NFL for what you do with the Senior Bowl, How realistic is that? How close to the NFL is the SEC football?
It's the closest for sure, but it's still a big jump. I mean, this sounds self-serving because of the role I have right now, but I hear it from our players even at the Senior Bowl. The SEC guys that come play in the Senior Bowl, like, whoa, now this is a big jump from the SEC. So then that next jump to the NFL is big. But in terms of getting the training, yeah, there's no better place in the SEC.
So when they get to Mobile, it's all of a sudden like, oh, I mean, every position is as good as I am, and we're all down here together, and it's like the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, you look at think of the tackle position. So like last year, Darnell Wright from Tennessee was our highest drafted player. He went 10th overall to the Chicago Bears. I mean, outside of Will Anderson, who he made a bunch of money against, he had a great game. What did he face another NFL pass rusher the entire year in the SEC? It was a down year for pass rushers, so he really didn't, So, but then you come to Mobile, every rep you take, you've got an NFL guy going against you. So it's not that they don't see him, and it's different, for each year. Like some years, there are going to be some corners that maybe don't see NFL wideouts week in and week out. So, the SEC guys are the most prepared, but the NFL is a different animal. It's just it's a different speed.
Well, it's just like that idiotic discussion that sports radio likes to do, like Georgia versus the Houston Texans.
Right.
And my response is, all right, Georgia on an 85-man roster, there might be, 20 guys that play in the NFL on that roster?
Right.
All 53 Texans are NFL players.
Yeah.
Right? So it's 53 versus 20. It's just a stupid argument.
You hear that every year.
Yeah.
Whoever the best team in college football, and they would get their teeth kicked
Of course they would.
by any NFL team.
Yeah, it's just the dumbest thing.
So I'll say this: like when I was working for the Seahawks, this is probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. Before I took the Senior Bowl job, our GM in Seattle, we were playing the Carolina Panthers, and he and I went up to a game at Wake Forest. We drove up to Winston-Salem and saw them play Boston College. And Wake had a really good corner. So we were on the field for like the first half of that BC Wake game. That's ACC football, right?
Yeah.
It's big boy football. It's good football. Yeah. And then I hadn't been on a pro field for a long, long time. And the next day, so I'm down in the field watching the Panthers and the Seahawks play live, and it almost looked like a different sport.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, just the speed and the violence of the collisions, like it was completely different.
Yeah, my wife, I'm a Dolphins fan, so I drug her to a Dolphins-Falcons game, and we were fortunate enough to have the tickets where you could walk out, on the field suites, right?
Yeah.
And I told her, I was like, when we walk out here, you're not going to believe how big these NFL guys are. I'm like, this is going to blow you away. So we walk out, and the first player she sees, she's like, oh, my God, you're right. That guy's huge. I said, baby, that is Matt Schaub. He's the backup quarterback. Now, Matt's a big quarterback, but I'm like, that's just the backup quarterback. That's the first guy she saw.
Yeah, those guys are, the NFL guys, they're different. I think a lot of college players feel like the NFL is just the next step, and it's kind of a rite of passage. Oh, I'm going to get done playing college. I'll play in that league. Like the NFL is a really, really hard league. When you see guys that last, 6, 7, 8 years in the NFL, they're incredible football players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, Senior Bowl, 75th anniversary, and Jim was just telling us before we started here some of the amazing events that are going to go on down in Mobile, in our very own state for – some of the names you were reeling out, we won't unveil it because the fans are going to get a vote, but some of the names they're going to vote on are going to be crazy big names.
Yeah, we can throw some out. They're going to be on the ballot. But like for the linebacker, you've got Derek Brooks from the Tampa Bay Bucks, Brian Urlacher, Patrick Willis. On the defensive line, you've got Aaron Donald, Michael Strahan, DeMarcus Ware.
I'd like my odds with that 4-3 right there.
Yeah, you'd get after the quarterback. I know that. You'd be able to blitz too. So no, we're going to have a big gala. We're not going to announce all the plans yet, but we're going to have a big gala on Friday night. We're going to do a huge concert like we always do. And we fall in Mardi Gras again. So I know for people around the state that don't get to do much Mardi Gras on, and that's and for our national fan base, like it's going to be a big draw. Like you come for Senior Bowl, but you get to experience Mardi Gras too. It's kind of the best of both worlds for Mobile, so it's going to be a fun year.
Yeah, Reese's Senior Bowl, SeniorBowl.com for all that information. Our coverage here in Nashville presented by MyBookie.ag, code next round. Also our friends at Moore's Marinade and Sauces, your secret sauce for grilling and backyard barbecues with friends and family this summer. Moore's Buffalo Wing Sauce adds the perfectly tangy flavor that keeps you licking your fingers even after the wings are done. Dip, drizzle, or slather Moore's Buffalo Wing Sauce on everything you eat. See why grill masters prefer Moore's Marinades and Wing Sauces by visiting mooresmarinades.com. Get recipes and grilling instruction at mooresmarinades.com. Good luck on the 75th. Always good to talk to you, Jim.
Yeah, guys, thanks for having me on. This was great.